Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice Lewis. Today we have a jam-packed show around the league. You know, it's heating up around the league. You know, you got the trade deadline coming up pretty soon, so obviously that's an exciting time in basketball, time in history. You know, you have a lot of other things coming up. But we have some stories for you today. Obviously, we got to start with the big story of Zion Williamson debating last night against the San Antonio Spurs. What does this mean for the Pelicans and the status of the 8th seed in the West? We also have some news around the league, and just some updates with some standings, getting close to the trade deadline, because obviously these shows are now going to become more based around the trade deadline. Obviously, you'll start to hear trades that are heating up, and obviously it's just a very exciting time in basketball if you are a basketball fan. Well, like I said, we're going to start with Zion Williamson's debate last night. Zion for the first 3 quarters he looked out of shape. He looked unready to go. But, I mean, that's what you'd expect from a guy who hasn't played in a few months, really hasn't been able to work out too much in these last few months. You know, Zion, I think, you know, he's not always going to be like this, but he's back now. And that fourth quarter just showed you why everybody in the league and the Pelicans and everybody wanted him as the first overall draft pick in this year's NBA draft. His skill level is unprecedented, and you cannot deny the talent that he possesses. Zion is a guy who can really change your team, potentially. He could put them on the map, and he could really lead them to a championship in the future. If him and Brandon Ingram can work it out together, obviously that's going to be the first big thing, while also working Zion back into the lineup, getting him maybe some more minutes, depending on what the medical team that the Pelicans say, is him working with Zion Williamson. I mean, not working with Zion, but him working with Brandon Ingram, because, you know, right now those are in some people's mind, the 2 best players of this season in the league. And the Pelicans have talent. You know, you still got Drew Holiday, who can be sometimes and has those days where he could be the best 2-way guard in the league. You know, it's one of those things that's really exciting, I think, for me, for a basketball fan, too, to see Zion back, because he's a guy that a lot of people have looked forward to watching play for a very long time. And him being back is just, like I said, great for the league. Everybody's been waiting for Zion to come back. And, you know, like I said, last night, got disappointed in that fourth quarter, scoring 17 straight by himself and giving the Pelicans the lead during that time. Now, we can sit here and say, you know, the Spurs, they did give Zion some open threes, because obviously that's one of the questions coming out. Could Zion hit the three? Because he have a jump shot? So going for 4 on threes was a great sign for that. Because, you know, I always say sometimes during these recovery periods and these rehab periods, sometimes not playing can honestly be one of the best things that can happen to a player, because you have the ability now to work on your game, improve your game. And so, yeah, when I was hurt, I couldn't do this. But when I started rehabbing, I started working on things that maybe I wasn't great at, and that improved. So now when I came back, I can now do the thing that you weren't expecting me to do. You know? Zion does kind of have slightly a bit of a set shot, but I think that we're going to have to see how that translates when it comes to for him coming into future games that are coming up for the Pelicans. Like I said, obviously this is a debut that a lot of people have been waiting for. A lot of people, I think even Pelicans ownership and coaching, is very happy with what they saw from Zion. And, you know, this really could be a lot for the Pelicans. There's a reason why they're starting to scale back on trade talks, and they're starting to kind of put more of their eggs in one basket with Zion, because, you know, this team is not that far out of playoff spot. Zion's back, who some people think is going to be their superstar player. Your team has some talent. Western Conference is not that great from the bottom, so you feel like there's a chance for you to make the playoffs. I think they want to see where they are by the trade deadline, which is about 2 weeks away, I believe. And they want to see, okay, do we need to make a trade and trade some of our guys for pieces, or do we keep this team together and make a playoff run? the report coming out of New Orleans is that they want to make the playoffs. So that's obviously a goal where it's like, you feel like if you're within reach of making the playoffs, why not try to make the playoffs? You don't really want to tell your team, yeah, we're in reach of making the playoffs, but we're just going to give up because we don't want to. So, like I said, it's very exciting for them. It's very exciting to see Zion back and Zion playing at the level he's playing at. Like I said, once he gets more in shape and gets more minutes under his belt, I only expect Zion to be improved and better, and that's going to be scary for the league. A lot of people are asking questions like, could Zion be the new face of the NBA? Obviously, that's a discussion that we can't determine yet after one game, but a lot of people really are giving him kind of that LeBron hype when he came out of high school. And it's like you're kind of having the media and the social atmosphere pushing Zion to a point where if Zion is anywhere where we think he could be, we're thinking new face of the league. And he could be one of the first players in a long time, like LeBron, who moves ratings, where ratings improve when Zion's on your network. LeBron was such a ratings mover. Even if you hate LeBron, you watch LeBron because either you wanted him to win or you wanted him to lose. Even if you don't like a player, you just don't care to watch a player. There's a difference from not liking a player, just not caring to watch him, and not liking a player and watching him lose. LeBron, when he was a villain, people wanted to see him lose, so they tuned in to see if he would lose. Same thing if you like him. You may like a player, you may think he's nice, but you may not feel the need to watch him. But there's those players that you really love that you always try to see if they're on TV. And Zion is one of those players that a lot of people think he could be that. That one player you go out of your way to see and say to yourself, man, I really want to see this man play. I'm going to go tune in tonight to watch him play. It's really a great, it's a great thing to have. I feel like it's great also because LeBron is entering somewhat his last years in the league. We don't know how long exactly, but, he's not going to be here for another decade. He'll probably be here maybe for another 5, maybe years, maybe potentially. And maybe 8, we'll have to see. But, having a guy like Zion, who a lot of people can now shift to, I think is going to be exciting. Now, obviously, a lot of talk is about his weight, because people wonder about his weight, and is he too heavy to play at the weight he's going? Does he need to slimmer down more? Does he need to get back in better shape? His body isn't built the best. Obviously, we'll have to see what the New Orleans Pelicans staff says to him. We're going to have to see what Pelicans ownership thinks. We're going to have to think what Zion thinks. Zion may feel like, I'm fine at this weight. But we'll have to see. Obviously, a lot of people worry about his knees and legs giving out because he puts a lot of twerk on himself because he's a very athletic player at his size. So obviously that's a concern that some coaches and some people around the league have with Zion long term is this going to affect him in the long term scheme of things? Because you don't want Zion going out. You don't want Zion losing. Like I said, the Pelicans can make a run here and they make the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be pretty incredible for all of them because, he's just a great piece to the team where they're looking for that superstar, and now they have that superstar. But speaking of that, also, like I told you, they're fighting for the 8th seed. And so we're going to give you the updated standings on the 8th spot. I'm going to go into more overall standings later, but I'm going to give you overall standings on the 8th spot in the Western Conference. Right now, at number 8 in the Western Conference right now, we have the Spurs at the 8th spot. They're winning last night, jumping the Grizzlies, who have one more loss than them, but the same amount of wins. So it was only by a half a game. But if Memphis wins, they'll get the tiebreaker and get back in front. Obviously, that's going to be a battle. Obviously, John Morant, is a guy that everybody loves to watch play. Obviously, the Trailblazers are still competing. Damian Lillard just dropped 61 on Martin Luther King Day. So obviously, that was a great performance by Dollar Dame out there competing at a high level. The Suns are still in it, still competing. They still have a chance to maybe make the 8th seed. Pelicans obviously are one game behind the Suns, actually a game and a half. Timberwolves still technically have a chance, even though they're further and further losing ground. The Kings even have a chance, even though they're in the same record as Minnesota. And both of those teams are on 6 and 7 game losing streaks, so it's not looking good. And obviously the Warriors are last in 10 and 36. They technically have the worst record in the NBA. And that's basically your up-to-date standings on the 8th race for the 8th spot, because it looks like everybody else is above 6 games above the Spurs, starting with the Thunder. So those are the teams from, I would say, realistically, from Pelicans to the Spurs, they're going to be competing for that 8th spot all season long, and it's going to be very important that none of these teams go on a big losing streak because that could be what knocks you out, especially with half of the season almost over with when we're getting to the second half. But coming up next, we have some news and notes around the league. We have Doc Rivers calling out Montrezl Harrell. The Knicks brass actually told their team it was playoffs or bust before the season started, and Dallas is looking for front court help after Dwight Powell goes down with an Achilles tear. All that and here and more on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last step, we talked about Zion Williamson shining his NBA debut. We also talked about the status of the 8th seed in the West after all these results with Zion coming back into it, just to update you on what's happening on that side of the spectrum on the Western Conference on the bottom end. Now we're going to get into some news and notes around the league, and now we're going to start with Doc Rivers calling out Montrezl Harrell in team meetings. If you remember early this month, Montrezl Harrell made a comment after one of the games I believe they lost. I believe they lost to the Knicks. And he said that they're not a great team. They're not a great team. We have to become a great team. Well, apparently Doc Rivers was never a fan of those comments. And in team meetings, his ire sometimes when he's angry with the team has been directed at Montrezl Harrell for those comments especially. You know, I think Doc just really doesn't like the fact that, you know, you're coming out, I guess, in a way and saying, you know, we're not that good. People think we're that good, but we're not that good. And he's not really happy about that because you want a more positive morale around the team. And basically, Rivers wanted to basically just be like, listen, if you're frustrated, keep it to yourself, keep it internal, don't vent to the media and create distractions for the locker room. Which, you know, it's interesting, you know, and there's also a report that, you know, tensions have been quietly building in the locker room, according to multiple sources, but Harrell's comments confirmed the uncomfortability some felt. Also, it rubbed some players the wrong way, and that maybe that his mood after the game was more dictated about his individual performance more than the game's outcome. So it's very interesting to hear stuff like that. Obviously, it's always a big thing in the media and in the NBA to not say certain things to the media because some things need to stay within the locker room. Like if you're frustrated, they would rather you just keep it within the locker room that you're frustrated, not necessarily tell the media that you're frustrated, because now once it gets out that you're frustrated, then it's going to keep surrounding the team. Are you still frustrated? Dysfunction. If the team loses more games, what's going to happen? Is something going to explode? You know, it just adds an extra group of unnecessary uncertainty, I think. And that's why a lot of coaches are just like, don't vent to the media. Don't say these things to the media. Keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Be private, because you never want to mess up the chemistry within the locker room. Obviously, some players may not like it if you vent to the media. That can sometimes rub people the wrong way. Obviously, Montrezl Harrell is a very important part, obviously, of this team and what they do in the future, what they want to do in the future. But at the same time, it's very important that, you know, they keep just holding on and keep going about it the same way they've always been able to go about it. You don't obviously want to create any extra issues within the Clippers locker room. I feel like that's one of the reasons why Kawhi came out earlier this month and said, hey, it's just the regular season, guys. Have fun. Don't stress. Because you can tell the Clippers don't take the regular season as serious. Because they feel like when we get to the playoffs, we know we're one of the best teams, if not the best team, when we're at it. And I think they'll have these games where they'll lose to teams they shouldn't be losing to because of that. Like, if they get down early, they might mail it in potentially. Just because they're not really trying their hardest to go out of their way to win. Because they're just like, listen, we'll be a top 4 seed, potentially top 5, and we'll beat whoever we go against. Because that's the type of confidence they have in their team and in their group. Obviously, a lot of people have a big, disappointment about Kawhi Leonard's load management, but I feel like Montrez, he just has to make sure and remember, don't vent too much, especially with a team that's a winning record. Don't vent unless it's one thing if y'all were losing and then you vented. It's one thing if you're usually winning and then you just lost a game and then you just vented, because it's just like, well, yeah, we don't want to lose this game, but you don't have to necessarily vent about it. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, but I think it's not anything crazy, but it's just something that you hope dies over and just kind of just like everybody's back on the same page. There's no tension in the locker room, and the Clippers keep playing the type of basketball we know they can play. Now, you might think this next story is kind of funny, but right before the year, obviously, before the year, every team has aspirations. Even if you're realistically knowing we're going to be bad, you still have aspirations. We can make the playoffs. Because no player is ever going to think we're not that good, I'm not that good, et cetera, et cetera. So the Knicks brass, obviously the Knicks have been in a lot of dysfunction the last few years, for the past decades, if you want to say. So the Knicks brass before the year told the play team that it was playoffs or bust. Now, some of you might be laughing right now because you would think, why would y'all think that y'all are making the playoffs? And, one thing about the Knicks structure is that they have guys. It's just, in terms of putting it together as a team, it's not good enough. But they have pieces. They have guys. Marcus Morris is having one of his best seasons. I just think that the Knicks, I think this just goes to the culture of this franchise, where it kind of makes sense with that statement why they fired Fizdale so quickly. Because they thought they were going to be better. They thought they were going to be competing. And basically after like the first 15 games, you could kind of tell, yeah, y'all are not competing. And the Knicks brass was just like, well, it's time for him to go. And you just kind of feel like, whoa, y'all aren't that talented. Like, you look at the team, y'all don't have a star player. You don't even have any stars really on the team. Unless RJ Barrett came out and just was like Luka. And RJ Barrett's played well. It's just he's a good player. He's not like a star. Y'all have no stars. But yet you expected yourself in the Eastern Conference, because sometimes I think ownerships in the East think, well, the East is weak, so we should be able to get some wins and be able to stay in the contention. But it's like, no, y'all really aren't that talented. Even the teams that don't have the best record in the Eastern Conference have better players than you. They have a star unlike you. So the fact that you sat here thinking that you were going to make the playoffs, or you had expectations to make the playoffs, could be a very laughable offense to some people's thought process. So, it just shows more dysfunction from the Knicks. The fact that they believe that, they thought that they were going to be better than what they were. That's why, even Stephen A said it before. A lot of people said it before. How did y'all think y'all gonna make the playoffs with this roster? Like, what made y'all think that y'all were just gonna be better all of a sudden? And now you didn't even get to the first quarter of the season. You fired your head coach, and you've been going by the head coach the whole year. Just more dysfunction on the Knicks franchise. It's really disappointing. Because when the Knicks are good, it's good for basketball. But right now, that's why they're losing their esteem. They're losing their fame. They're losing their prestige because of everything that has happened. Many people want James Dolan gone because they feel like he is the main reason why they've been in this type of mediocrity for years. And I just know it's very frustrating for Knicks fans to keep watching this team and seeing the performances that you've been seeing recently. And speaking of the Knicks, quick story here. Steph Curry actually originally wanted to be drafted by the New York Knicks. He wanted to go to the Mecca of basketball. And could you imagine if Steph Curry was still Steph Curry on the Knicks? Because I think when Steph Curry was drafted, I believe it was around the last years or the last great year that Carmelo had on the Knicks. So if you had added Melo and Steph, it would have entered a very interesting dynamic there. Obviously, Steph Curry didn't become Steph Curry until a few years after the fact, but you knew Steph Curry could shoot. So it was going to be interesting that if he was drafted by the Knicks, obviously this is just another string of draft picks the Knicks have missed on. Because they missed on a lot of those too. Because when was the last draft pick you remember the Knicks really working out? Like realistically. I mean, the best one you can say so far is R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. And we still don't have a complete Jerry out on them yet. So, it's interesting that Steph Curry wanted to be a Knick. He wanted to be in New York. He wanted that pressure. He wanted that Madison Square Garden hype. But I'm sure he's very, very happy that he actually just ended up in Golden State with a better run franchise and a better ran organization. So, there you go right there. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Dallas looking for front court help because after Dwight Powell goes down for injury, Derrick Jones accepts an invitation to compete in the dunk contest, and CP3 won't opt out of his contract of $44 million for next year's deal. All that and more on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Doc Rivers calling out Montrezl Harrell about his comments earlier made in the month. The New York Brass told the team that it was playoffs or bust before the season, even though we all pretty much knew that was unrealistic. And also, Steph Curry actually wanted to originally be a New York Knick. But now we're going to get some more news notes around the league, and we're going to start with Dallas. Obviously, Dallas the other night lost Dwight Powell for the season with a torn Achilles. So they've been looking for some front court help. Obviously, again, the trade deadline is coming up, so they're probably going to ramp up who they may want. Names that have been suggested have been Covington, Andre Drummond, Gallinari as three of the top options that been discussed for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, Dwight Powell was a really good player for them. Very important to what they do. Obviously, they're making the playoffs, so obviously they don't want to lose him and then not try to, replace him. I think, luckily there's a lot of good forwards that are available right now. So I don't think it's impossible for them to find a guy that, could fill in for Dwight Powell. It just depends on who they feel like is worth it. It's interesting that they have thought about getting Andre Drummond because of the fact that, he's more of a center and Powell's more of a power forward. I honestly have very strong feelings and suggestion that I think the Gallinari would be best for this role because Powell was a very athletic player who had a good bit of a mid-range game, but was more of an inside the guy, athletic, big plays, active on defense. Even though he wasn't the best on-ball defender, I think Gallinari adds a versatility because you might lose the athleticism, but you get the shooting, so it will open the floor more up for maybe Luka if he wanted to drive and other players. So I think that's something they should look into. They've looked into Joakim Noah. Obviously, they've touched base with him. Obviously, he's more of a gaining some depth on the team. But the only thing about getting Danilo Gallinari is that we don't know if the Mavericks have enough assets that Oklahoma City will want for him. So that's kind of their biggest obstacle in terms of that particular trade, because we don't know if they have what it takes to actually go out and get him. And obviously, you don't want to try to make a trade knowing that you don't have the pieces required to do what you got to do. This roster really for Dallas is very top heavy. With Luka and Kristoff. Tim Hardaway's emerged as a solid player. So I can understand them looking at this team saying, we have stars. We just got to fill out the rest of our roster. We have some pieces. We have some guys we like. We just got to get this ship running again. We got to get this ship going again. We got to get everybody back on the same page. We got to get everybody ready to play and be able to compete. So when we hit the playoffs, we get the best possible seed and also be able to compete at the highest level to reach the levels of success that we want to reach, if that makes sense. Because obviously they're not doing all the things that they're doing this season just to make a first round appearance and get eliminated. They're trying to compete against the best teams in the Western Conference because they probably feel like with the talent we have, we legitimately feel like we can compete against them. And Mark Cuban is not afraid to go out there, get into some luxury tax and pick up an expensive player if it's going to help his team. Mark Cuban is one of the owners who are not afraid to do that. And so if he has to do out there to help make the Mavericks ready in the absence of Dwight Powell to get a better, more improved, or just a guy who maybe has the same and similar skill set to him, he will definitely explore every avenue and see what he can do. Obviously, trading is obviously a great negotiation because you don't want to give up what you need, but you also realize what we might have to give up might be worth for what we're trying to do. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Mavericks actually do come up with. And, we'll have to see what happens there. In other news, Derrick Jones Jr. and Dwight Howard formally officially accept invitations to the dunk contest. Derrick Jones Jr. obviously is the most exciting one out of the two because we've seen his dunks. If you watch NBA basketball, you watch the Miami Heat play, this man is a dunk machine. He is the highlight factory, putting everybody on posters. And we really think that, with the potential we've seen from the regular season, he really could put on a great show during the dunk contest. Obviously, the dunk contest in previous years hasn't been as exciting as some people would want it to be as it was in the past, but I think that's a good start. You're bringing back somebody like Dwight Howard, who was a former dunk champion, who has reemerged in his career, who feels like he's still athletic enough to do these dunks, to make very exciting and creative dunks. And then Derrick Jones Jr., who also can do very exciting dunks and is very athletic. That's why you kind of just wish John Morant would have played, because it's like, dang, we really have all the potential and the hype to have a great dunk contest with all those competitors in the dunk contest race. Also, CP3 won't opt out of his $44 million option that he has. Now, we got to be realistic here. It's $44 million. Why would you opt out of that? It's 44. Because some people thought he would opt out and try to join the title contender. CP3 was like, I'm good here. Because it's $44 million. Because CP3 knows, if I opt out, I'm not getting $44 million from nobody else. They may not even want to give me 30. So I'm not trying to take a 50% plus discount to go to a championship team when I can stay on this team currently that's constructed in Oklahoma City and still compete, even if it's not for a championship, but just be able to compete, play in relevant games, and lead these young guys and develop them so they can be better after I leave or retire, and then they can potentially go on and bring a championship to Oklahoma City in the future if they get enough pieces there after he leaves. So, I think it's smart on CP3. That's what you would expect any normal person to do. If your job came up to you and said, hey, we're going to give you $40 million obviously if you stay. But if you leave, you have a great opportunity with a much better business than us, but you're going to have to take more than 50% off of what you get now. I'm sure people are going to sit there and just be like, you know what? I'm just going to stay here because, yeah, they may be better and they may be more headed in the direction that which you would think I would want, but y'all paying me more than they are. And $20 million is a lot of money to give up just to get to a better situation. So I feel like Chris Paul is just making the best decision for him. He's making the best decision that, why wouldn't he? So I feel like, personally, it works out. And also, we have some breaking news here on the podcast. Yes, we break news too. Y'all don't think we do, but we do. We don't have both the lineups, but the Eastern Conference starting lineup has been released. And the Eastern Conference starters they are looking like the Eastern Conference starters. Atlanta's Trae Young, who we all expected after having a fantastic season for the Atlanta Hawks, almost averaging 30 a game. Boston's Kemba Walker, this was always expected, because even though Kyrie probably had more votes, it was just kind of one of those things where maybe the coaches maybe preferred Kemba over Kyrie. Plus, Kyrie missed a lot of games. So, Toronto's Siakam. Some people might have been surprised by this potentially, but Siakam has been one of the top vote getters during this process. Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Obviously, he's the captain of the team, most votes overall. And Philadelphia's Joel Embiid. So there's your Eastern Conference All-Star lineup right here. They're probably going to drop the Western Conference lineup pretty soon, so stay tuned. I might bring that up in the next segment, but just stay tuned for that. But coming up next, we're going to get into some updates on the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference standings and give you just a quick overview of both sides and how everybody's doing right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Derrick Jones and Dwight Howard accepting the invitation to compete in the dunk contest. Dallas looking for front court help after Dwight Powell goes down. CP3 not opting out of his $44 million option after this season. And also just some quick news in the Eastern Conference All-Star starting lineup as this podcast is being recorded. So right now, we know who our starters are. Trae Young, Pascal Siakam, Giannis, Embiid, and Kemba Walker. So now I'm going to give y'all some updates on the standings and the teams and just what everybody's looking like right now. Just a quick overview for every team, in my opinion, like, okay, where they are. And just things like that, just got to give y'all just the right thing. So, starting with the Eastern Conference, obviously, as you know, the number one seed is the Milwaukee Bucks at 39-6 right now, currently on a 7-game winning streak. Milwaukee's look like the most dominant team in, I think, all of basketball, like they did last year. It's basically last year again for Milwaukee, just looking dominant, beating everybody, looking like they're going to have a 60-win year, be the first seed. They're running away with the Eastern Conference. They're going to have home court pull out. And the thing about it is, it's kind of weird. There are plenty of teams in the East that you think maybe could be Milwaukee, but nobody looks as dominant as Milwaukee looks, and that's why they're seated where they are. The Miami Heat are second, obviously the surprise of the season, because everybody wasn't expecting a Jimmy Butler-led Miami Heat team to be second in the Eastern Conference. But with the emergence of Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero and Dragic coming off the bench and Bam Adebayo with Jimmy Butler, This team has played some of their best basketball. They're currently on a 2-game winning streak, 29-14 on the season right now. I mean, my bad. 31-13, my bad. I was reading something wrong, my bad. 31-13 on the season. Just they're on pace to have a 50-win season. So, which would be higher than what a lot of people thought Miami would be this year. I mean, listen, some people thought they would be like a 5th or 6th seed. Maybe even an 8th seed. Just depends on who you ask. But, Miami obviously is a pleasant surprise, but congrats to them. Third in the Eastern Conference is the Boston Celtics at 29-14. Tied also with the Boston Celtics at 29-14, the Raptors. Obviously, those two teams are going to be battling, obviously, with the Miami Heat for seeding all year long. Because, this 2 through 6 is going to be a big jumble of where we're going to finish. Everybody's record are very identical and close to each other, so there's not a definitive better team record-wise. Everybody's kind of around the same record. Obviously, the Celtics with Kemba Walker playing well, Jason Tatum playing well, Jaylen Brown playing well, Gordon Hayward playing well. Boston is a team that you need to watch out for. Do not sleep on the Boston Celtics. They have all the ability in the world to upset one of these teams. Because at the end of the day, right now it looks like everybody's looking up at Milwaukee. So we're trying to figure out which one of these teams do we think can give Milwaukee the biggest challenge. Boston is a dark horse in that, in my thinking. And Toronto too, because Toronto's the defending national champions. I mean, defending NBA champions. You cannot sleep on the Toronto Raptors. If you do, they might surprise you like they did last year. We may think, oh, there's no Kawhi, there's no chance. But listen, Siakam has had a great year. That's why he's an all-star starter now. That's why he's playing at the highest level he can potentially play at. At number 5, the Indiana Pacers at 29-16. Indiana, like I said, Victor Oladipo's return is up on the horizon. When Victor Oladipo gets back to being Victor Oladipo, watch out. Indiana has shown that constructively they are good without him. They can win without him. Now, obviously, when it comes to the playoffs, they won't have enough juice. But that's where Victor Oladipo comes in. He could be the player that gives Indiana enough juice to upset one of these teams and make a further playoff run than we expect in the long term. So you got to look out for the Indiana Pacers, too. Do not think that this is going to be an easy slouch team to beat because they may shock you. Number 6 is the Sixers. Some people consider the Sixers a disappointment because they feel like they would be better. They would be competing for the top spot in the Eastern Conference with Milwaukee, and they're 6th right now at 29-17. Obviously, Embiid going down doesn't help, but they have played some good basketball without him. They've learned to play better without him, but I think they're learning how to win without Embiid, which always could be good because when Embiid comes back, now it's like, okay, we've played without you. We know how to play when you're not on the floor, and then when you're on the floor, we know to give it to you, feed you, and let you dominate in the post. Number 7, the Magic. Obviously we're getting to the point in the Eastern Conference where every team has a losing record. They're 21-24. They have guys, Vucevic, Augustine, Fournier. Like, they have guys, but just they don't really have a star. It's just like, Magic are 7th. Good job for them. Like I said, last year made playoffs. This year made playoffs. They were 7th last year. They could be 7th again this year. And then number 8 right now, currently in the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference, is the Brooklyn Nets. 18-24. They've lost 4 in a row. So they're kind of not looking the best, but hey, they have the spot. Obviously, 2 teams beneath them are Pistons and the Bulls still competing for that 8th spot. Still have a chance to make the playoffs, so obviously you don't want to count them out and just believe this is just automatically over already. And then in the Western Conference, number 1 is the Lakers. Obviously, they've been the most dominant team all year, 35-9. LeBron, AD, superstars. So they're doing what we expected the Lakers to do. Number 2, Utah Jazz. Utah Jazz was on that 8-game winning streak before they got snapped, but now they're on a 3-game winning streak. Had to move all the way up to 2nd in the Western Conference. This was a team a lot of people will say watch out for because they added shooting, they added Mike Conley. Even though Mike Conley hasn't had his best year, this is a team that's dangerous and a team that you don't want to sleep on to think that this is going to be an easy W because it's not. Number 3, the Clippers. Obviously, even though they hold manage a lot of games, they're still 3rd in the Western Conference. Just shows you how good of a team they are. They came off a loss, but I think they're going to try to bounce back, try to win the next game. They're going to be there at the end. That's one thing we know as people. They're going to be there at the end, and that's really what they care about. Number 4, the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, Denver has started to find their stride. Michael Porter Jr. has played very well in his role after getting increased minutes. Beasley. They have a lot of good players. So if Denver ever want to make a trade, I'm sure they'll have plenty of suitors for players on their team. Number 5, the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, they're holding on about Dwight Powell, but they still have Luka. They still have Kristoff, even though Kristoff is out right now. When he gets back, I think Dallas will still be fine. They'll make the playoffs. I think that Nuggets Mavericks matchup right now looks like a great matchup, but right now, it's going to have to depend on what happens in the seeding. Number 6, the Rockets. Rockets are. Some people think the Rockets aren't as good as as the record shows. Some people think they should be worse. Some people think they should be better. It's really hard. Houston's always been that third best team or that second best team the last couple of years behind the dynasty of Golden State. Now they could be the 6th best team in their own conference this year, and you feel like all they did was lose Chris Paul, but maybe that was a bigger loss than we expected, even though James Harden's having a historic season. Number 7, Oklahoma City, obviously the surprise. People thought OKC was going to tank. They're going to be a bad team. They're going to just go in the next season. Chris Paul's old, whatever. But they've played well. They're one of the most clutch teams in the NBA. They lead in clutch points this season. So in the fourth quarter, these guys with Chris Paul, they know how to beat you in the clutch. Schroeder is a great compliment to CP3. And I think it was really one of the reasons why they had such success. Also with assets they picked up from the LA Clippers with Sages Alexander and Gallinari. It's been a great contribution to their team. Number 8, San Antonio, which we already went over the 8 spots and who's the PD for it, so we really don't have to go into too much detail on that end over there. Now, I'm also going to give you after talking about the Western Conference, I'm going to give you the Western Conference All-Stars for the All-Star game starting lineup. LeBron James is the captain, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, and James Harden. This was a starting lineup that I think a lot of people expected. These have been the 5 best players that some people may think in the Western Conference all year. So the fact that they are the 5 top players voted into these All-Star break, it's what you expect. Obviously, some people are going to have an argument about Kawhi because he low manages some games, but we can't deny it. Kawhi Leonard is a top 5 player in this game. Some people may consider him the best player in the world. Some people may consider him the 2nd best player in the world, 3rd best player in the world. Kawhi's up there. But those are your All-Star starters for the Western Conference. And, there you go right there. But coming up next, we're going to switch to college basketball. We're going to talk about some of the big games around college basketball this weekend and the latest net rankings here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment gave you some standing recap, both Eastern and Western conferences. Plus, I also talked about the latest Western Conference All-Star lineups that were announced. If you missed it, for the Western Conference, you have LeBron, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, and James Harden as your starters for the Western Conference. Now we're going to get into some college basketball talk. Obviously, because, this was a big story in college basketball. We have to talk about the brawl that happened between Kansas and Kansas State. Obviously, this was a very disappointing day for the league. Now, obviously, you have people at home who loved it because they love seeing chaos. But also, it's not good because these are young men, college basketball players, getting into a fight. It was all started by the K-State player for stealing the ball, trying to get a layup, even though they were down by like 20-plus points. Obviously, it could have got worse because we don't know what DeSosa would have did with that chair. like some WWE out there. But luckily they took the chair away from him. Obviously, this is not the image and the view that the NCAA wanted. They did not want their players ever anticipating in these types of brawls. Any brawl in any sport is not welcomed in terms of the culture. Basketball especially. Hockey, it's okay. Baseball, it's okay. Football, it happens because it's just, I feel like it's more initiating to the game as normal. But in basketball, it's not as accepted. It's looked at as a very, very bad thing to the league. Obviously, in the NBA, Malice to the Palace was something that was one of the considered the darkest day in league history. Obviously, college basketball's had some run-ons. Remember a couple of years ago, Marcus Smart pushed a fan while he was at Oklahoma State playing for them. So clearly, any type of violent acts are not acceptable. They're not tolerated. Thank God nobody got hurt. Obviously, that's always good. We don't want any of our young athletes or anybody who was around getting hurt. Obviously, players were suspended, and hopefully, this won't happen again. So we're gonna hope for the best, and we'll have to see, But now we're going to get into some top games for this weekend, what you need to tune into. Friday night on Fox Sports, Butler versus Marquette. Butler's trying to bounce back from, a very disappointing loss, or losses. They've lost 3 in a row. Remember, Butler only had 2 losses, and now they have 5. Now they have 4. They only had 1 loss, and they have 4. Butler was looking like one of the most promising teams in the NCAA. Now they've lost a bunch of games going against a very streaking Marquette team that's won 3 in a row. So you kind of have 2 teams, I guess you could say, on 2 sides of the spectrum. One's trending up, one trending down. Obviously, this is at Butler, so obviously this would be a great time for them to get back on track and be able to play with one of their best games of the season right here. So you get that confidence back. You go on these little streaks, and you're kind of, this is really going to test the team. It's going to test the tightness of the team, the chemistry, the togetherness when you're going through a stretch of losses, for a team. But never forget, Butler was not projected to even be this good. So in a way, you can always sit here and kind of be like, well, we weren't even supposed to even be here to begin with. Another game you should look out for this weekend. Memphis and SMU, both teams are 14-4 on CBS Sports, obviously. SMU, they were ranked earlier in the year, but now they've fallen out. They're 6-4 in their last 10. Obviously Memphis, we remember what happened with them. They were undefeated, lost, I believe, 2 straight, and then has lost 1-1, lost 1, 1-1, lost 1. So they've been very up and down all season ever since that loss to Georgia. So, they've been trying to figure themselves out and figure out who they are as a team, trying to bounce back, get back on track, and just, win and compete at a very high level. And then you have good old Kansas and Tennessee. This game's big to me because this is an inter-conference matchup. I believe this is the Big Ten versus SEC. That's what they're doing. That's the theme. Big Ten versus ACC. Kansas is going against Tennessee. This is also a good game because this is one of the first games that they have since the suspicions of some of their better players going against the Tennessee Volunteer team looking for a big upset. This is going to be at Kansas. Tennessee has won 2 straight. They're 5-5 in their last 10, but they're looking to make some regressions onward, and this would be a great opportunity if they could upset a Kansas team, losing some of their best players. Obviously, another big game is, to me, not in terms of the national level, but just big in terms of, just upset alert. Dayton versus Richmond. Richmond's 15-4, Dayton 7-2. Currently, Dayton is on an 8-game winning streak. They're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They're playing a very, very great Ivy League team in Richmond. So, these games always have the potential for upsets, in my opinion. You don't want to look at these games and think, oh, this is going to be easy for Dayton, because you never know. It might not be easy. You never want to assume a game is easy, because once you do that, that's when upsets can happen. You never want to bring your guard down against any team in the basketball, especially in this year of college basketball, with as many upsets as we've seen, you can never let your guard down. So that's an upset game that potentially could happen. Continuing in the Big 12 versus SEC matchup too, Texas Tech versus Kentucky, 18 versus 15, big matchup on ESPN. This is going to be at Texas Tech, 14-4 versus 12-6. Obviously, Texas Tech coming off a loss Kentucky's won 2 straight. Big game, clearly 2 ranked teams. Great matchup on Saturday at 6 o'clock on ESPN. You want to tune into that game. Both teams are trying to make us bragging rights for their conference. Obviously, some of the best that both conferences have to offer. Obviously, you also got number 1 Baylor, the new number 1 team in their first game at number 1 going against the Florida Gators. Obviously, we expect the Florida Gators to lose this game, but this is at Gainesville. Upsets are prominent. When you're number 1, you haven't had great success keeping that spot as far as the season has gone. Because you get number 1, then you usually lose it the next week. So if Baylor can beat Florida, which is right after the after the Kentucky game and Texas Tech game, that's going to be big for them. So that's going to be very important to make sure to see what happens there. And just in terms of long-term respects and talent moving forward. And obviously, just another big game to look out for on CBS Sports. San Diego State still undefeated, 20-0 going against UNLV. UNLV isn't a great team this year, but we always got to keep track of them because they're going for the undefeated. Remember, they've not lost, and it's just one of those things that you just can't. They're the last undefeated team left, so people are going to be wondering, are they going to lose the game? That's kind of the big question. Now we're going to give you the updated top 10 net rankings. Number 1 currently, San Diego State, because they're undefeated. I mean, you got to give them the credit. They're undefeated. They're not playing in a tough conference, but they're undefeated. They beat everybody that's been thrown at them, and you can't hate on that. You can't take that away from them. You can't. Baylor, number 2, obviously the new number 1 in the AP, but now they're number 2. They were actually number 1 recently, but obviously San Diego State must, in the committee and the net ranking metrics, have a better resume overall than the Baylor Bears do, which is why they're number 2 now. Kansas is 3rd. Obviously, they won their game on the day they lost all their guys, but they're 3rd. Gonzaga is number 4 right now. Still solid, 20-1. What you expect from Gonzaga? Probably going to have another solid record, be a number 1 seed at the end of the year, as long as they don't lose another game. Dayton is number 5 in the Atlantic 10. I always said this is the team to watch out for the season. They are proving it right now. They're only lost 2 games all year in the Atlantic 10, and they're looking forward to continuing this weekend with another good win. Number 6 is Duke. Obviously Duke bounced back from the loss against Clemson, but they're continuing to play at a high level, continuing to play well. They're going to be there at the end. I think they're going to be in that realm, 2nd, 3rd seed, I think, at the end of the year. Potentially a 1st seed if they keep getting some wins and some guys fall off. Number 7, West Virginia. They've had some very impressive wins this year. They've only lost 3 games. West Virginia has been, I don't want to say the surprises of the Big Ten, but some people may have not expected West Virginia to be as good as they are, and now they are. They're number 7. Number 8, Michigan State. Obviously, Michigan State's getting up there. They're winning some quality games. Obviously, it's being seen by the net metrics, and they're moving them up slowly. Butler is number 9. Even after 3 straight losses, they're number 9. They still have a very good resume. And they haven't lost to the worst teams in the world either. They've lost to some pretty quality teams, which is why they're still where they are. And then finishing out the top 10 is Arizona, who's bounced into 13-5. They're 0-3 on the road. They're only a team in the top 10 that has not won a road game, but they have played a very tough schedule, which in the metrics of the net rankings have made them very much still viable for a top 10 spot within the rankings. But coming up next, I'm going to give you my suggestions on who I think will be traded by the trade deadline and why. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about basketball games that are upcoming that you should look forward to. I also gave my thoughts on the brawl between Kansas and Kansas State. And then I also gave you the latest top 10 net rankings by the NCAA. Now we're going to get into some trade talk, and we're going to talk about players that could potentially be traded, and I'll tell you if I think they'll be traded before the trade deadline and why. Might even give you who. But the first player we're going to talk about is Marcus Morris. Obviously, right now he's playing with the Knicks. He's having one of his best seasons, if not his best season as a player in the league. Obviously, I think that's a product of being on a bad team, and he's kind of their best players, which is why they have the record they have. But he's a great piece to have. Like, he can help you win. Trust me. Put him on a championship team. He's a very valuable piece. Some possible destinations for him are the 76ers, the LA Clippers, and the Miami Heat. Now, I think unless the Knicks get pushed with a very good offer at the deadline, I think Marcus Morris will stay with the Knicks. I think they don't really have much of a reason to get rid of him right now. Even though, he could get you some value. Well, what are you really looking for if you're the Knicks? That's kind of the question. No trade is going to make you better. And I don't know how much they care. And I don't know who's going to give up a high draft pick for Marcus Morris. So I feel like unless somebody comes up with a good offer, Marcus Morris will stay with the Knicks. I don't really see him leaving the premises. I think he'll stay. And I think he'll just remain a Knick till the end of the season. And then he'll probably be let go. And then he can join the championship contender then. Next player, Andre Drummond. Obviously, he plays in Detroit right now, but the potential destinations are the Raptors, the Atlanta Hawks, the Boston Celtics, and the Dallas Mavericks. I think before I was going to say no. With Dwight Powell going down, a part of me kind of feels like he might now leave. Because Dallas might really get to a point, seeing how they play without Dwight Powell is going to really make their decision for them. If they're struggling in the front court, I could see them now pushing forward to make that trade to get Andre Drummond. That's why I think Andre Drummond will be traded. I just think he's not as athletic as Dwight was. But he can still get you points, and he's a rebounding machine. So you're picking up rebounding and a guy who can get you some buckets in the post from a guy who was athletic. So I think that could potentially be the trade that they make down the stretch. But it also just depends on Dwight Powell. But right now, I'm going with Andre Drummond getting traded. Next person on the list, Danilo Gallinari. He's obviously been in trade talks. People have considered him with the Portland Trail Blazers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks, the Atlanta Hawks. He has a very big lot of suitors. I think he is most likely going to be traded. I'd be surprised if they kept him. There's a lot of people who want him that really feel like he can help out with the service of the team. And he's a very good player still at this point in his career. It can contribute with his shooting prowess. So I don't see why, not. He's also playing on an expiring contract, so you can make a decision if you want to bring him back. Or, he can leave, and then, he can join any team he wants to join. So I think that'd be definitely something you got to look into. Andre Iguodala, obviously, is the next guy. He's, obviously been the biggest name that's been out there since the summer. Obviously, he's on Memphis, but Memphis is not expecting him to play for them. His destinations are the Lakers, Clippers, Houston, and Dallas. I think he'll get traded, but I don't know. I'm going to go with yes, he'll be traded, but I'm not sure. You would think that a trade would have happened by now with all the time that has happened. But again, when the trade deadline comes around, you kind of have more of an idea of what your team needs and is, and you may feel like, okay, let me push it. Let me offer something a little bit more substantial and get Andre Iguodala off the Memphis Grizzlies' hand. I mean, the Grizzlies want to get rid of him. The Grizzlies are trying to find a good deal, but they're also being smart. We don't want to just take anything. We're trying to take a deal that's good for us. And I think that's what you should always want for your team when trying to make a deal like this. Next is Robert Covington. He's been heating up in trade talks. Obviously, he's a stretch 3-4 guy, can shoot the ball on the wing, 3-and-D guy, which you need in today's NBA. He has teams, the 76ers are interested, the Rockets are interested, and the Mavericks are interested. Notice how we mentioned the Mavericks a lot. He's a guy who can stretch the floor, can get some good baskets. He can have a big game for you here and there. You know, Robert Covington is not to be slouched on, not to be slept on. He can play. He's had an impressive season, you know. And, you know, he's shooting better than he's ever had in his career. And he's one of those guys who can match up with a lot of scores in the league. So he'd be a great addition, you know, for any team that wants him. I think he'll be a great addition for any team that needs a 3-and-D guy. So Robert Covington I think, will be traded by the trade deadline. Bogdanovich is another guy from the Kings, a shooter, young shooter too. And, you know, teams that are interested, Lakers and Knicks, I think, you know, I'm going to go with no. Even though he has some interest and he has people who want to, you know, add a guy like him. I mean, he's coming. When his deal expires, he's going to want to pay Rose and a role upgrade because Sacramento is not really trying to give him a starting role with the team they have in the disappointment season they've had. I think he's only 27, so he definitely could get you a decent return, but I think he's someone that you would want to pull the trigger on if you need a shooter, but I don't think anybody's going to pull the trigger. He's not someone you really hear that heats up in trade talks and so on and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Next up is Derrick Rose. Obviously, he's a very big name. Derrick Rose has played very, very well. You can say he's been the best point guard on Detroit. So, I mean, a lot of teams are very much interested in Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is one of the better players in the trade market. 76ers are interested, looking for a backup point guard to Ben Simmons, and the LA Lakers, because they're looking for a point guard. You know, he's averaging 18 points a game this year, and he might get an all-star nod this year. And remember, this is him coming off the bench and not even being a starting point guard. So that shows you Derrick Rose can still play at a high level, even at 31 in this point in his career. You know, and he's also playing on a bargain deal. He'll only get 3.7 this season and 3.7 next year. So, you know, I don't think he'll be traded, though. It honestly depends again. I think if the Lakers wanted him, they're going to have to give up Kuzma. I think that's one of those ones you have to give up Kuzma if you're going to get Derrick Rose. 76ers is the same way. You're going to have to give up a pretty decent player to get Derrick Rose off Detroit, because I don't feel like Detroit is as motivated to move off Derrick Rose. Another player is Markieff Morris, the other Morris brother. He also plays from Detroit. Houston's interested, Lakers and Clippers. I told you that I said that I don't think Marcus is going to be moved. I think Markieff has a better chance to get moved. Now, we may not think he's as good as his brother, but he's still as physical and tough as his brother. And I think that you can't take that away from him. I think he will. I think he's more likely to get moved, but I also kind of feel like he won't get moved, even though he has a team-friendly deal. But I would not be surprised if there was a big deal. And if he was in it, then maybe you'll see him get shipped off, maybe with an Andre Drummond. I would not be surprised to see that at all. Another guy is Kevin Love. Portland, Phoenix, and Denver, and the Heat are interested. This is something that I think a lot of people want to happen, but at the same time, it's going to be hard to get Kevin Love off the books because that cap hit and how much money he's owed, will a team be willing to take that? That's when, that's going to be the real question. Will any team be willing to take that contract of Kevin Love? But right now I'm going to go with, I don't think Kevin Love will be traded, at least this season. And then lastly, Kyle Lowry. Some people think he will be. He's turning 34 in March. He's played well this year. The Raptors aren't motivated to move him, but I think they're also in the business of making a good deal for their franchise. If a good deal comes along, don't be shocked if they do move Kyle Lowry. And so with that, I'm gonna go with they're not gonna trade him, but don't be shocked if a good deal comes up. But that's all for me today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Brice Lewis. Thanks for listening to the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, download, all of that. Please also follow us on our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.